Aussie Beach TV. You're watching Aussie Beach TV. You're watching Aussie Beach TV. The hottest girls you will ever see.
We're here today with Ian, our crane from the UK at Koala Park in Brisbane. How are you going today?
I'm good. It's absolutely beautiful, and what a wonderful location this is. You know,
It is.
and only 2 or 3 miles off the freeway.
Yep.
But here we are in the wild, and the birds are trying to steal our lunch.
Our meat pies.
Our meat pies. Yeah.
They are.
It's beautiful. Absolutely stunning. Thanks for choosing the location.
I mean, thank you for turning up and taking the time out to come and talk to us. In your busy schedule, it does mean a lot. It really does. Can you please tell our viewers about your involvement in the anti-coal seam gas movement in the UK?
Yeah. Well, actually, the last time I was over here in Australia, I was talking about the problems of coal seam gas in Australia, and the whole issue was just starting to kick off in the UK. Yeah. And literally, as soon as I got back to the UK, I started a tour of 64 dates around the country to try and raise awareness about this industry, because this industry, which extracts the gas through a process known as hydraulic fracturing, and this is a process that wherever it has been unleashed around the world results in the contamination of water, the soil and the air. It causes people to have some pretty serious negative health impacts.
Yeah.
And so here in Australia, where since I was here in southern Queensland, so just about 250 kilometres to the west of here,
yeah.
Since I was last here, they've drilled about 3,000 wells. And in parts of southern Queensland, the farmers can no longer farm the land. They can't give the cattle the water, the livestock the water. They can't use the water to grow crops, and they can't use it for any domestic purposes because it's become so contaminated. And yet the people in the cities have no idea what's going on.
Yeah, because they just don't tell anybody.
They don't.
Yeah.
It's out of the news, and people obviously in the cities, they have very busy lives, and you know, their free time, they're out partying or dining or whatever. And so they don't have the opportunity to actually investigate what's occurring. And this is exactly what the industry and the government, unfortunately, rely on.
Yeah.
So in the UK, we are still frack-free.
Yep.
We have had no wells drilled or fracked since 2011. So only 1 well has been drilled and fracked in the UK to date. It's becoming more and more difficult to maintain that record.
Yep.
But our intention is to do everything we can to raise awareness and eventually get this industry shut down in the UK. And I would love to think that ultimately that would also be the case in Australia,
yes,
before this beautiful country becomes an even bigger desert than it is already.
That's exactly right. And do you think more and more people are starting to click on about everything that's happening and will back everything up and make a change?
It's tough duty here in Australia.
Yeah.
When I was in Gloucester in New South Wales, if I had a buck for every time somebody said to me, you know, Ian, this is a really, really conservative community, and they trust the government. So you've got the attitude of ultra-conservatism, where people still believe everything the government tells them is true, and that their government would never do anything that causes them any harm. And then you've got the other attitude, which is, she'll be right, mate.
Yeah.
And it's like, whatever happens, don't worry about it, because she'll be right. And unfortunately, the government and the industry rely on those two attitudes to be able to just go and do whatever it is that they want to do, which is effectively rape and pillage this beautiful country of its natural resources.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And it's such a shame, really.
It's horrendous. And I mean, as always, I always ask people not to take anything I say at face value, but to do their own research and look at this for themselves. And I would absolutely encourage people to put into their search engine Brian Monk CSG, or Brian Monk videos, because Brian Monk is a farmer out in near Tara, or Dalby. And he's put a number of videos up on YouTube showing how this industry has effectively destroyed not only his livelihood but also his life, because Brian is absolutely convinced that the health issues that his 4-year-old grandson suffers from are directly related to living in a contaminated coal seam gas environment. it's horrendous because, you know, we can't imagine that there is an industry that would knowingly do this.
Yeah.
But it's just greed.
Yeah.
It's sheer greed.
Because of the money?
Because of the money, absolutely. Yeah. And, you know, because of the power of these corporations, they lobby the politicians, they promise the politicians, you know, enormous salaries and when they leave office.
Yep.
So all they've got to do in return is make sure that the coal seam gas industry has pretty much open access to the country,
Yep.
completely ignoring the fact that the electorate don't want it.
Yep.
And then when they come out of office, where of course they earn a nice salary, but you know, in the scheme of things, it's not a mega salary. And then when they leave political office, they go join these companies, and of course that's when they make out like bandits.
We recently filmed at Bentley on the coal seam gas. What are your thoughts on that?
I was absolutely amazed that you guys made the trip down to Bentley, but it was wonderful to see you there. And I was watching from the UK.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I was watching the Aussie Beach reports from Bentley, because I was following the whole Bentley operation very closely, because this is a tremendous success.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, Northern Rivers is a rather unique area, and I think pretty much everyone in Australia, certainly on the East Coast, recognises that Northern Rivers, you know, the communities there, Byron Bay, Nimbin, and the likes, you know, these are the... I mean, I'm told that they are acknowledged as the old sort of hippie communities.
Yeah, yeah.
Whereas today, you know, it tends to be environmentalists and ecologists and people who have an interest in protecting the environment. And because Bentley is so close to Lismore, to Byron and Nimbin, then people from these communities were going en masse to Bentley. And I think that some weekends there was like 2,000 people there. And then when the New South Wales government threatened to send in 700 riot police to break them up, the following weekend there was 10,000 people there. So the New South Wales government realised that they had a little bit of a problem on their hands here, and it might not go down too well politically. So they backed off, and they actually withdrew Metgasco's licence on the grounds that clearly they hadn't fulfilled their obligations for community liaison.
Wow.
So that's one down, but and it's great to see. And I mean, Bentley is an absolute inspiration. I mean, it's an inspiration for, I think, people in the UK, in the US, and hopefully also here in Australia, because when I was down in Gloucester in New South Wales, which is about 200 kilometres or so south of Bentley, maybe even a little bit further, but you know, there was barely a dozen people at Gloucester. And I actually asked somebody, I said, what's the difference between Gloucester and Bentley? And they said, about 1,800 people.
Yeah.
And ultimately, when the politicians are not listening to their electorate, all you're left with is getting in front of the gate and actually stopping the trucks from coming in.
Yeah.
And if one or two people do it, then obviously they'll just be arrested and charged with obstruction.
Yeah.
But when you've got 2,000 or 10,000 people there,
passionate about it,
it's a whole different ball game.
Yeah, and it's good when everyone gets together and actually does take a stand, because good outcomes like this do happen.
Well, that's a great observation, actually, because you know, I think one of the great things that's coming out of the coal seam gas agenda right across the world is that it's bringing people together from right across the social spectrum. You know, it's bringing people together who probably wouldn't even talk to each other. They probably actually don't agree on very much else. But they do recognise that this is an industry that is going to contaminate the one thing we all need, water. And especially in this country, which is a spring-fed nation, and the gas industry is sucking water out of the Great Artesian Basin at a rate 6 times greater than it can naturally replenish. And you know, what's going to happen to Eastern Australia when the Great Artesian Basin is effectively sucked dry?
Well, it's just going to vanish away, because even humans are, what, 85% made of water?
Exactly. So, you know, basically we can survive without gas. We can survive without oil, but we can't survive more than 2 or 3 days without water.
Exactly.
And so, you know, there's something not right about what's occurring here, and hopefully what we'll see is more people from all around Australia coming together to fight this pernicious industry. Making a stand. And I think the critical thing is, you know, we have to get people to focus on what they agree on. Because the establishment does a really good job of divide and conquer. So what it does is it identifies the things that they know that, say, you and me disagree upon, and then they'll try and drive a wedge between us based on the fact that we disagree. The fact that we're both in total agreement on something like the protection of our water, that's what we have to focus on, and not get bogged down on what we disagree on.
That's exactly right. And it is a big deal.
It really is.
It's huge.
You know, and the other factor is that right across the world, about, I would say, probably 70% of people right at the front of the anti-fracking movement are female.
Yep.
And I think this is because the women can actually see that obviously we don't have access to water, then, you know, we're threatening the whole longevity of humanity. Whereas unfortunately in a lot of cases the men are more interested in, you know, the immediate, you know, how do I get the money for this month's rent or mortgage, or keep the food on the table, run the cars, keep the kids in the school, whatever.
Yep.
And they're not looking at the longer term. Now I accept that that's very much a generalization, but you know what I would ask any of the guys watching this is to question how you're going to survive without water. I mean, God damn it, even beer needs water.
Yeah, well, exactly right. That's a good point.
And I can't imagine
Yeah.
an Aussie bar without beer.
And Australia with no beer sounds like misery to me.
And I'm sure to probably 95% of the male population of Australia.
Yeah.
So if, you know, if the male population of Australia wants to keep drinking Australian beer, it better start thinking about its water supply.
Yes, exactly.
Aussie Beach TV. You're watching Aussie Beach TV. You're watching Aussie Beach TV. The hottest girls you will ever see. Hey, 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 hey. Aussie Beach TV. You're watching Aussie Beach TV. You're watching Aussie Beach TV. The hottest girls you will ever see. Aussie Beach TV. You're watching Aussie Beach TV. You're watching Aussie Beach TV. The hottest girls you will ever see. Hey, 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 hey.
We're here today at Daisy Hill Koala Park in Brisbane with Ian Crane.
Hi Janaya, how you doing?
I'm great, how are you?
I'm wonderful. It's a beautiful, beautiful location.
It really is. Tony Abbott has upset quite a few Aussie voters with his policies since taking over office as Prime Minister. What are your thoughts on the man who thinks he could take on Vladimir Putin?
Tony Abbott.
Tony Abbott.
I think I hold Tony Abbott in as much regard as I do David Cameron.
Yep.
They are both tools of those who think they are the rightful rulers of a planetary fiefdom.
Yep.
You know, Tony Abbott, David Cameron, John Keyes in New Zealand, Harper in Canada, Obama in the US, these are all puppets.
Yeah.
You know, they actually don't have an original thought in their head. I was actually speaking to somebody yesterday who has had some dealings with Tony Abbott.
Yep.
And they said, you know, that you can sit down with him and you can actually, you know, get the impression that he's a genuine guy. You know, he'll sit down and say, yep, that's great. Yep, I think we can work with that. Yeah, that's real good. We'll take that on board.
Yep.
And then he'll go into another meeting and say completely the opposite. So, I mean, this is unfortunately the attitude of the politician.
Yeah.
They will say whatever it is that they think the audience that they're
Wants to
talking to
hear.
wants to hear. I mean, basically, they've sold their soul.
Yep.
And as we've discussed previously, you know, what they do is they're looking to make the big bucks when they leave office.
Yep.
So they're looking to kiss the butt of the corporations.
Yep.
So they'll do whatever it is that they are lobbied to do by the corporations, and then when they leave office, they'll get a job in these corporations, earning mega bucks. I mean, look at Tony Blair. You know, since Tony Blair left office in the UK, he's become a multi-million, maybe even a billionaire.
Yep.
You know, because of all the work that he now gets outside of politics.
Yeah.
And sadly, you know, the days of politicians actually going into office because they have altruistic intent or even, you know, philanthropic intent are gone. You know, the vast majority, even if they do go into office with genuine intentions, they very quickly learn that if they want to retain their political office, they have to compromise, they have to prostitute themselves, and you know, do whatever the highest bidder asks of them. I mean, I've had the pleasure, I have to say, of meeting at least one politician, Australian politician, in the LNP here in Queensland, who, in my opinion, demonstrates the utmost integrity.
Yep.
Yeah, I had the absolute pleasure of having a few conversations over the last couple of days with Jason Woodforth, who's an MP, I think, for a suburb of Brisbane.
Yeah.
And, you know, it was an absolute pleasure to speak with somebody, you know, who was clearly genuine, but understood the system, understood how, you know, he has to operate within the system, but he is operating in what I would term full fiduciary trust. In other words, he absolutely recognises that he's in public office to represent the people that elected him. And I think Jason has had a remarkable victory recently, because I think he's managed to get legislation introduced which gives local authorities the opportunity to decide whether or not their water supply is fluoridated.
Yeah.
So this is fantastic, and this is what we need. We need more politicians like Jason. Unfortunately, I've probably just made sure he doesn't get re-elected.
Okay, British Prime Minister David Cameron is a dick. What kind of is he going to come out with next?
I didn't realise that he was held in such high regard here in Australia.
Now, I am your master. The last thing this country needs is us, the Conservatives, worse than the alternative. We don't care if you're driven to despair. Don't you dare say it's not fair. I'm not saying it's not funny. It is for me. I've got loads of money. This is the party of the motherfuckers the country is run. For me and my mothers, this is the party of the motherfuckers. We just don't care about the mother suckers.
He's actually not even held in that higher regard in the UK. I think that there's a lot of people in the UK who are looking forward to May the 7th next year, which is the UK general elections, and looking forward to running his butt out of number 10. Yeah. The biggest problem we have, and I mean, I know this is also an issue in Australia, and you know, my conjecture in Australia is that you don't elect governments. You elect governments out without actually considering what you're bringing in.
Yeah.
And then you pay the price when the next government's in, because they're actually worse than the one you just voted out.
Yeah.
Well, you know, we may be sort of coming into a similar type of situation in the UK, because whatever it is that we replace Cameron with is certainly not going to be any better. I mean, this is, again, this great disease that we've been really talking about. It's the thread of everything that we've been discussing in the many days that we've been sitting here in this beautiful forest.
Yeah.
His agenda is certainly not benevolent towards the British people. David Cameron, Obama, Harper, Keys, Abbott, they are all puppets of the global corporatists.
Yep.
They will do whatever it is that they're told to do, which is why they are perpetrating this agenda to effectively contaminate the global water supplies. You couldn't make it up.
Yep.
I mean, who in their right mind would support an agenda, this hydraulic fracturing agenda, that is effectively on course to force water to a level of scarcity that is just unimaginable.
Yeah.
You know, where water becomes the highest priced commodity on the planet. And of course, we just can't function without it. We can't live without it. And they will just simply see that as collateral. You know, you can't afford to pay for your water? Oh, well, best die then. Yeah. And we're already seeing this in places like in Detroit, where the council there are bulldozing houses to stop the homeless moving into them. And then they're basically saying to the homeless, no, sorry, you can't afford your water. It's not a human right. So, you know, just go drink from a puddle if you can find one. And, you know, in Florida, we've got the crazy situation where a 90-year-old is arrested because he's feeding the homeless. You know, Florida has made it illegal to feed the homeless. But there's no work for these people, so how can they get an income? You know, the world produces more food every day than we need to feed everybody on the planet. The reason that we have so many starving is not because the food's not available, it's because they can't afford it. And the corporations would rather dump the food at sea or into landfill than give it away.
I think it should be that they should have a certain time when the companies finish at the day and just they're only going to throw it away anyway.
Absolutely. Absolutely, because, and the reason you think that way is because you're human.
Yeah.
You know, and you have this natural, inherent compassion for those that find themselves in a situation that's somewhat less fortunate than, you know, those who are able to feed themselves.
I know my daughter and I, we went out to dinner and we had the leftovers with us, and there was a homeless guy out front of that, and we gave it to him, like, and chocolate from the chocolate machine.
That's great.
Yeah, because I couldn't walk past without not. So.
And that's the natural human reaction, and yet that's what they're trying to drill out of us, that it's wrong to feed the homeless. And if you're a 90-year-old with compassion, then we're going to arrest you and threaten you with jail if you keep doing it. Which, I mean, I hope would actually encourage even more people to go out there.
They're trying to take every little human right away.
Well, look no further than an interview, and people can find this on YouTube.
Yep.
But there was an interview which was done with a guy called Peter Brabeck in 2005.
Yep.
And at the time, he was the chairman of Nestle. And in that interview, he made it very clear. He said that in his opinion, access to fresh water should not be regarded as a human right. And what he was basically saying is, unless you are contributing to the corporate payroll, then if you can't afford your water, then basically die. Which is exactly the same as Lang Hancock was saying when he was interviewed in 1984, when he was talking about the Aborigines. And he said the Aborigines that have assimilated into our Western lifestyle, all well and good, but those that haven't, let's start feeding them drugs so that we remove their fertility and they can't breed.
Okay.
So this is where we're heading, and this is why it's so important, Janaya, that people from all around the world start to take a look at what's occurring.
Yeah.
You know, and as I've said before, I know that when the Australian population gets the bit between its teeth and really starts seeing what's occurring, then they're going to be a force to be reckoned with.
Yeah.
So, you know, my counsel to the Australian public is, you know, she will be right, mate, but only if we all get involved and actually force the changes that we all know we need to see.
Yeah.
Because if we step back and just think she'll be right, then we've got a real problem.
Vladimir Putin, the Russian president, has been under attack by the mainstream media lately. Why do you think this is so, and what are your thoughts on him as a leader?
I think Vladimir Putin is going to be recognised in history as one of the great statesmen of the early 21st century.
Yep.
I think that Vladimir Putin is probably right now what is actually keeping the world away from World War III.
Yeah.
There's absolutely no doubt in my mind whatsoever that the global banksters are desperate to initiate another war.
Yep.
They want to use this as an opportunity to get the rest of the world in so much debt.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it is complete bullshit. I mean,
Yeah.
and who wants war?
No
Have you ever met somebody who says, yeah, let's go attack? No.
No,
I mean,
everyone's got family they need to go home to, and like the last thing they want is death everywhere.
well, I think the
again.
only people, if these guys want war, they should go themselves.
Well, that's what I think, instead of sending
The young men.
fathers out. Yeah, exactly. Away from their family, they're going to lose out on everything.
Exactly. You know, I mean, once upon a time, obviously in history, but if you had a leader who wanted to initiate a military attack, he led from the front.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, these guys are so far to the back, it's unreal.
I mean to say Tony Abbott put our military on a plane and sent them over, and he's just still over chilling out. Doing
Yeah.
nothing.
Whereas Tony Abbott should be in the front row.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I mean, unless the politicians are prepared to literally go to war, then they shouldn't even think about it.
Yeah.
And the reality is that, you know, war is not natural to humanity.
No.
You know, the natural state for us is one of love and compassion.
Yep.
And mutual cooperation.
Yep.
And yet, you know, we are fed this constant fear porn that tries to get the people behind their leaders so they can initiate war. And who pays the price at the end of the day? The people.
Yeah,
You know?
everybody else, but not them.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and they still live their luxury lifestyle.
And their big houses and their big restaurants, and while we're all out here.
Their armoured cars,
Yep.
where they hold meetings inside big ring chain fences. Yeah, it's
Exactly.
ludicrous.
Yep.
So I think that one, I recognise the achievement of Vladimir Putin. I mean, I think he knows obviously the world's press, the Western press, are
Yep.
demonising him, but his attitude is he's going to hold his truth.
Yep.
And you know what? Whoever would have thought that 30 years ago we'd be tuning to a Russian TV station to get the truth?
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't encourage anybody to watch the BBC unless they want to literally see a whole bunch of diatribe and fantasy
Yeah.
put forward. If you want to get a handle on what's really going on, then tune into Russia Today, which is why the British government is looking to do everything it possibly can to stop Russia Today broadcasting within the UK,
Yeah.
because they know that more and more people are starting to tune to Russia Today. And why? Because more and more people know that Russia Today is actually putting out the truth.
Yeah.
And Russia Today isn't warmongering, unlike the BBC and the mouthpieces for the global corporations.
Yeah.
So I think that Vladimir Putin, and like I said before, I'm not suggesting he's whiter than white,
Yep.
but nonetheless, I think that he is the guy right now who is keeping the world on the brink of war
Yep.
rather than at war.
Yep.
And I think, that Vladimir Putin probably holds a few aces. I mean, I think that Russia needs to release the information that we all know it's holding about what really happened on 9/11.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that might be the game changer.
Yeah.
He's holding the ace, and I think that obviously the Western establishment, they know this, and they're desperate to try and prevent him from releasing this information, and it's such dynamite information that he's obviously not going to release it until it's absolutely necessary. You know,
Yeah.
it is literally a last card.
Yep.
But that's why I think that we probably won't end up going to war, and it will be thanks to Vladimir Putin.
Yeah.
You know, if the producers of Russia Today are looking to reach out to new audiences in novel ways, then they could do a lot worse than making contact with Aussie Beach TV. Especially if RT is looking to set up a satellite station here in Australia.
Yep.
Then, maybe Aussie Beach TV could be on point in reaching out to that new audience. Who knows?
I totally agree with you.
Stranger things have happened.
That's it.
Aussie Beach TV. You watching Aussie Beach TV. You watching Aussie Beach TV.
And it's easy on the ears and not too bad on the eyes either.
Aussie Beach TV. You watching Aussie Beach TV. You watching Aussie Beach TV. The hottest girl. Aussie Beach TV. You watching Aussie Beach TV. You watching Aussie Beach TV. The hottest girls you ever seen.
Israel, in my opinion, is a rogue nation.
Violence in the Middle East has flared up again. Please explain the situation in your own words so that we here in Australia can better understand.
Okay, I mean, obviously it's a very complex situation, and the reality is that most of the Western media only pumps out one version of events, which is the Israeli version of events. Before I go into deeper explanation, let me make the observation that there are many people who are resident in Israel, many Jewish people, who are as annoyed, upset and frustrated at what's going on right now as people everywhere else in the world. It is not true to say that everybody who lives in Israel, all the Jewish people, support their government. The Israeli government is a Zionist government, and let me make this very clear.
Could you just explain what that means?
Zionism is an extremist religio-political organization which goes back about 130 odd years or so. And basically the goal of the Zionists is to literally take possession of the whole of the Middle East between the Nile and the Euphrates.
Wow.
Yeah, they call it Greater Israel.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely outrageous. And there is one book that I would recommend that people look for, and it's a book that only a Jewish historian could have written. Because if anybody else had written it, they would have immediately been dismissed or demonized as either anti-Semitic or whatever. But this is a Jewish historian. His name is Ilan Pappé, and he literally goes back, you know, through the history and explains it. And he makes the observation, he says, anybody who believes that the Zionist government of Israel will stop before they have literally cleansed the whole of that area with, you know, from the indigenous peoples, the Arab peoples, is absolutely delusional.
Yeah.
He knows, you know, although we get fed the fact that, or the supposed fact that the Israelis are seeking peace, they're not seeking peace.
No, of course not.
And you know, the people who live in Gaza, I mean, this is like the most outrageous concentration camp on the planet. You know, it's a minuscule strip of land, and people are sort of crammed into this, and this is, you know, literally where they're supposed to live their lives. You know, and the people of Gaza, every now and again, I mean, the rockets that they launch into Israel are little more than fireworks.
Okay.
And what Israel sends back are, you know, latest technology in weaponry, including phosphorus flares. And, you know, I posted some pictures on my Facebook page. Facebook have probably taken them down now, because I post the pictures of the children that are brutally injured. I mean, you know, burned, all the skin burned off their body. I mean, it's horrific.
Yeah.
But no right-thinking human being can look at those pictures and not feel anger at what's going on there. And basically, the world needs to grow a set and literally stand up to Israel and say, look, this is outrageous.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, you might have had it tough in the past, but you got your own country now, but you know, they are the world's bullies. Israel, in my opinion, is a rogue nation.
You recently travelled to Gaza. What are your thoughts on the ongoing violence there?
Look, it's absolutely shocking what's going on in Gaza. What I found when I went to Gaza was a very, very beautiful, very warm people, totally dispossessed people, forgotten people, and people with no voice. It's like they are treated as if they're surplus humans. And I think the world really needs to pay attention to what's going on in Gaza. The recent violence there that we've seen by Israel against Gaza is unforgivable. It's absolutely unforgivable. You've got to bear in mind that the Gaza Strip is an area 5 miles wide, 25 miles long. It's home to 1.6 million people. 1.2 million of those people are women and children. There's over 800,000 children in Gaza. Over half the population is children under the age of 18. Any bombing and attack on a population like this is unforgivable.
We can destroy the whole population altogether. And
Well, that's what
start over again.
that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to. I mean, the ongoing dispute between Israel and Palestine is nothing short of ethnic cleansing, and it's been going on since 1948. And the world needs to pay attention. the Palestinian people are painted to the world as terrorists, but they're not. They're freedom fighters and they're a dispossessed people. In Gaza, you've got to understand, I mean, this so-called war that Israel just waged against the people of Gaza, Gaza is simply one territory of Palestine. It isn't even a country. The people in Palestine, they have no army, they have no air force, they have no navy, they have no ordnance, they have no artillery, they have no tanks, they have no RVs. All they have is some light weaponry and some homemade rockets, which are more sky rockets than anything. They simply go up and a pipe falls down. There was one Israeli saying how terrified he was because he had a Hamas rocket smash the back window of his car. In response, we find Israel dropping 500-pound bombs on residential areas. They took out 21 members of one family with one bomb. It's absolutely disgraceful. It is not a war, it is murder, it is genocide. And what Israel's been doing in Palestine has been breaking UN resolutions and things for so many years now. What it's doing in the occupied territories, what it's doing in the West Bank, it's absolutely shocking. And it really brought it to my attention. And there's a method that seems to be, it's like warehousing people. They're just warehousing these surplus humans and they're just slowly exterminating them. They're surplus, they're not important, they're irrelevant.
Well, it's been the same with a lot of tribal people as well.
Exactly, and so, but this is what happens to irrelevant human beings. And when we see what's happening with the economic models in our countries, what we're seeing here with the dispossession of the Australian people, the introduction of carbon tax, which has caused everybody's electricity bills to go up 3 or 4 times what they were last quarter. We're going to see more and more dispossessed people in Australia, and then these become surplus people that they can warehouse. So the model that we see in Palestine, especially in Gaza, is the model for the world. And if we do not pay attention to what's happening in Gaza, this will be what happens. This will be the way of the world. The way of Palestine will become the way of the world. We need to pay attention to what's going on there.
We need to become more aware.
We absolutely do. And I believe the only way we can do it is through trust, by understanding what our relationship with government is, like I was getting back to before. It's all about trust. This is all breach of trust. Everything Israel is doing in Palestine is breach of trust. It's a breach of trust of all of humanity. And how can these people get away with running this apartheid state, which is exactly what it is in Israel? It is an apartheid state. It is exactly what we're seeing, what we saw in South America, and it's unforgivable. And unfortunately for Israel, I mean, for the Israeli government and for the people of Israel who are suffering at this as much as anybody else, it's the government of Israel that's the problem, the Zionist-controlled government of Israel. These people are causing Israel itself to self-destruct because Israel will not survive the atrocities it is carrying out against the Palestinian people. Until they give these people their lands back and recognise them as human beings, Israel is simply paving the way to its own destruction. It will simply implode.
Well, what does we can everyday Australians do to help?
Well, boycott everything to do with Israel and make as much noise as they can about what's going on in Palestine. People really need to look at history. This isn't a struggle against the freedom for Israel. It isn't a struggle of religions. It's about land and ethnic cleansing. That's what it's been ever since 1948. When the lands were divided in 1948 after World War II, that was bad enough in itself, but there were set borders defined. And Israel has just decimated all of these borders, and it's reduced the Palestinian people to a state where they're treated less than dogs.
They've got nothing else to stand on.
They've got nothing. They're a forgotten people. They're surplus human beings, and they don't have a voice. That's the most important thing for people to understand, is they don't have a voice. So I really urge people to look into what's actually going on in Palestine. It's really important. Waking up. I don't think Israel is going to get away with what it's doing against the Palestinian people for much longer. I think it's coming to a head. Like I said, it's causing the state of Israel to implode. It's a self-destructive mechanism unless they deal with the problem. So by even going there and standing in solidarity with these people and helping this message get out to the world, I'm even helping preserve Israel. because this has to be recognised. There can be peace between these two states. They can exist simultaneously, and there can be peace. But we can't have this apartheid system that is currently in place, that's been put in place by the Israeli government, it's not workable. And the fact that it's there will destroy both cultures. So we have to pay attention. The degradation and the suffering of those people in Palestine, the lack of response from the Muslim world is extraordinary. It shows an incredible testament to the fact that Islam is a peaceful religion. Because we would have gone in and destroyed these nations by now.